Those who volunteered to take a 3D physical Earth vessel to assist with Gaia's ascension chose to take an Earth vessel that was third-dimensional, with a fourth-dimensional aura, and a fifth-dimensional light body, which was hidden within, and protected by, the core of their spinal column. Sometimes, or often, the difficulties of their third-dimensional life made the volunteers temporarily forget about the connection between their third-dimensional physical life, their fourth-dimensional astral life, and they especially forgot about their fifth-dimensional light body life. Often, once they forgot about their lives in the higher dimensions, they often became depressed, angry, frightened, and confused. Something was missing, or was it someone? Either way, they could not determine what was missing. Therefore, they could not find it. Hence, they became disconnected from their fourth and fifth dimensional family. Even though this family often entered their dreams, and even their daily thoughts, they could not believe that these imaginary beings that spoke to them in their dreams and meditations could actually be members of their own galactic, angelic, and higher dimensional family. Because they could not remember how to communicate with these higher beings, they often became sad and depressed. They did not know why they were sad and depressed, but they did know that they missed the constant contact with a reality that was kinder, gentler, and far more creative than the reality to which their third-dimensional consciousness was restricted. Fortunately, there were those who remembered that they too took an Earth vessel in order to assist Gaia with her planetary ascension. Unfortunately, most of them were unable to find many people with whom they could discuss their feelings, so that they could fully remember why they took an Earth vessel and how they could assist with finding, or was it creating, the reality that they, somehow, felt within. Those that did remember who they were, and why they took an Earth vessel, learned very young that it was best to keep this, knowing, to themselves. After a few negative looks, smirks, and "what are you talking about" responses, they realized that they were different from the others who only sought that which could be achieved in the physical world. Those who remembered did not care too much about fame in the physical world. They knew they were too different for the masses to understand them. Thus, they often became artists, writers, musicians, and scientists. In this manner, they could choose a path in which they could seek an answer to the unknown that they saw, felt, and heard. One of the unknowns that they experienced was that they could sense Gaia's changes. However, only a small percentage of those who were born awake remembered that they could merge with and communicate with their mother planet, Gaia. Maybe this inability to believe that they could communicate with Gaia was because they observed that most humans thought of the planet as a place rather than a being. Whether Gaia was a place or a being, she was constantly traveling through different places on her rotations around the Sun. Since the Sun was also traveling through different places on its rotation around the central Sun, there was always a new version of reality for those who chose to search beyond the limitations of their home planet. Eventually, the awakened ones slowly began to feel that something about their planet was changing. Because this group was innately curious, they sought out those who seemed to know something, anything, which could assist them to understand why the planet felt so different. At first, these awakened ones could not understand what was different or why it was different. They could only feel that something was changing in their planetary world. As time went by, this inner feeling grew more and more, so they began to seek information that could assist them. This is when they realized the difference between spiritual and religious. Whereas religion was based on ancient doctrines of a God that was above them, spirituality was based on something that was revealed within them. Eventually, they realized that this spirituality was an extension of the spirit that they felt within themselves. Slowly, they discovered that in order to go up, they first had to go within. Thus, that which had always been a search for something above them became a search for something that was within them. They also discovered that as they went within they could more easily go up. When they allowed their thoughts, emotions and meditations to take them deep within their self, they found a higher, kinder, more loving reality. But they wondered why this reality did not surround them in their daily life. Fortunately, more and more of these awakening ones sought to find a way in which they could bring their loving inner life into their, often challenging, outer life. Sometimes they met adversity if they tried to share their experience, so they learned to keep their ideas to themselves. However, as the internet grew, the awakened ones could find other awakened ones, as they had the entire planet to choose from. As the awakened ones communicated with other awakened ones all around the world, the relationship with planet Earth changed. More and more they realized that no matter how different the people, plants and animals were, the planet was the same, very diverse being. It was then that the awakened ones began to think about the planet as a living being that had its own life. In this manner, the awakened ones began to remember that they came to planet Earth, not to have yet another incarnation, but to assist their Mother Earth with her process of ascension. As they began to expand their consciousness from personal consciousness to planetary consciousness, they realized how limited their human consciousness had made them. When they thought of themselves as the core of their reality, they were alone, lonely, and often struggling for survival on a seemingly hostile planet. However, as they began to understand that Gaia was a living being just like them, everything in their life began to change. Humanity was no longer the most important being on Earth. Gaia was their mother planet. Therefore, their personal importance began to be measured, not by how they assisted themselves, but how they assisted their planet. Gaia was the one thing that everyone on Earth had in common. In fact, the health and welfare of Gaia affected everyone on Earth. Even the lost ones, who lived only for themselves, could not live at all without a healthy mother planet. The health of Mother Earth was the one thing that everyone on the entire planet had in common. Furthermore, the awakened ones soon realized that, every day, Gaia's own human children were damaging her planetary body. Unfortunately, many humans did not care about Gaia's health, as they only cared about themselves and those with whom they were intimate. However, even if they only cared for a few humans, that chosen few would be greatly harmed if Mother Earth were not cared for. Fortunately, Gaia's fate does not lie only in the hands of her humans. Gaia has her own family of planets that make up her solar system. Also, some, and not nearly enough, humans have dedicated their lives to assist Gaia. In fact, many higher dimensional beings made the ultimate sacrifice to send a small fragment of their multidimensional light into birthing humans. Once their multidimensional consciousness was within that vessel, they knew that that person would need to remain in contact with their higher dimensional versions of self, or they would become just as lost as the other humans around them. Those who survived childhood without forgetting their true, multidimensional self, were able to move into active duty to assist Gaia, as well as the humans who could not understand that Gaia was a living, breathing being. Unfortunately, they found that far too often their assistance was not desired or accepted. But sometimes, they could look at a person's aura and find another person who was born awakened. Thus, if that person's aura shone brightly above their head, and their heart felt open and loving, they could reveal themselves, very carefully. Fortunately, most of the awakened ones remembered other incarnations in which they were not careful with their gifts and were harshly punished, tortured, and/or killed. Fortunately, there are more and more people on Gaia's present reality who can remember, and heal, these past incarnations. However, fear still exists on Gaia, but mostly because of humans. Humans, who were meant to be the saviors of Gaia, have been the cause of most of her destruction. Fortunately, as more and more of humanity awaken to their own higher dimensional self, they can realize that they are, simultaneously, alive on myriad worlds, and many higher dimensions of each of these worlds. The challenge for the awakened ones is not to assist Gaia. The challenge for the awakened ones is to find within themselves the ability to send unconditional love and violet fire to the many members of humanity who spend their lives trying to gain and maintain power over others, often by gaining power over Gaia. Of course, these people were trained young to choose to create a version of reality in which power over others was more important than power within themselves. In fact, many of these lost ones have no way of discerning even the concept of power within. They have been trained from youth that others have power over them, and they must win back their power in any manner that they can. Therefore, if they discover any power within, they are instantly trained to use that power to gain power over others. Of course, the choice of power over comes from fear. It is for this reason that many great beings have taken incarnations on Earth to try to teach the people that power within, accompanied by unconditional love, will transmute them into a higher frequency of reality. One's power within will greatly expand if they use their inner power to assist others, as well as all of Gaia's many life forms. It is the creation of a life based on power within, service to the planet and others, and of course, unconditional love, that aligns that person with their higher self. Thus, when they are complete with life on a third-dimensional reality, they can transmute their third-dimensional earth vessel into their fifth-dimensional light body and return to a higher-dimensional version of reality. Most of the Ascended Masters taught that power within was humanity's birthright, but that they could only maintain that inner power if they lived via unconditional love. Different societies were sent different masters who could role model how one could ascend within their form of reality. However, the ascending ones were usually worshipped rather than followed. Of course, there are many humans who live according to their spiritual guidance. In fact, that number is growing, which is why we speak with you today. Today, we, your galactic and celestial family, come to you as ascended masters and angelic beings to remind you that you are all in the process of remembering your source self. Your source self is multidimensional and expands your consciousness from the core of Gaia's planet into the higher dimensions of what you have called heaven. Actually, heaven is a state of consciousness more than a place, in that one can only experience heaven when they resonate to a higher state of consciousness. All of you, who are wearing an earth vessel, are actually multidimensional beings who exist simultaneously in many different frequencies and locations of reality. You have lowered your consciousness from your higher dimensional self in order to log into planet Earth by wearing a third-dimensional earth vessel. When we say all of you, we mean all of you who would be attracted to, and read, this message. The truth is that any members of the Illuminati, as they are called within your time and space, could also expand their consciousness to find their great power within. In fact, those amongst that group who have embraced their higher consciousness enough to discover their power within, have discovered that power over others is not nearly as satisfying. In order to hurt others, they must hurt their own soul, their own self. More and more of the children of the Illuminati are discovering this fact, and are deciding to leave their family traditions behind. These children of the Illuminati have found a bit of their own inner self and inner power and want to explore that sensation. Once they explore the unconditional love that is innate to Gaia's core, as well as her atmosphere, the rush of power over no longer gives them joy. They want to know more about this feeling that they can only call love. Most of the children of the Illuminati had no love in their childhood home, so they do not know how to identify it. It may seem to be a strange concept to not be able to identify the feeling of love, but if you have never felt it, how could you identify it? It is the lack of love, generation after generation, that has allowed the darkness to continue. However, because a higher frequency of light is entering Gaia's atmosphere, humanity's innate higher frequencies of consciousness are being activated. As the frequencies of light entering Gaia, and all her inhabitants, continues to expand into higher and higher frequencies, even those lost to the depths of fear and darkness, will begin to feel a sense of relief, a moment of peace, a new hope for the future, and a glimmer of joy. Very importantly, the awakening humanity will begin to feel the Kundalini rising up from the base of the spine. The Kundalini is a system for the transmutations of the physical body into the higher resonance of the light body. The Kundalini has been known since the times of the earliest scribes. However, life on planet Earth was so difficult that only those priests far away on a mountain top could even begin to activate their inner power of transmutation into light body. Fortunately, as Gaia begins her transmutation, so will her humans, as well as all her life forms. That now is approaching, but only for those who can perceive and accept it, protect it and only use it for planetary ascension. This power is far too strong to be used for any personal needs, as a human does not have the needed dedication to totally ground that energy field in Gaia's core crystals and never use it for personal goals. It was the Illuminati's use of this great power for personal goals that has, and will continue to take them from control. Humanity need not worry about fighting them, as their need for power over others has activated the off switch for any expansion of inner power. This off switch was latent until the higher light came into Gaia's atmosphere. It is the higher light that will turn off the power over others, as well as activate the power within self. Humanity is finding the power within of their source self, but if that power were ever used as a form of power over, that power would sputter out and end. Yes, darkness has held Gaia in its grip, but now that the higher light, as well as we the galactics, angelics, ascended masters, and Elohim, have arrived to assist you, things will begin to change. Therefore, maintain your commitment to be one with your multidimensional, source self so that you can perceive and communicate with us, the higher dimensional versions of yourself. Please know that we are always with you because we are you,